What if a man from the upper Paleolithic survived until the present day?
You know what could happen? Yeah, the pancreas turns over cells every 24 hours, the stomach lining in 3 days, the entire body in 7 years, but the process falters. Now, if a quirk in his immune system led to perfect detox, perfect renewal, then yeah, he could duck decay.
Duck Decay. So this is a film, if you've never seen this before, it's called The Man from Earth. It is a 2007 film that's so indie. Like, it's all filmed within a single house with a very small cast, no special effects. It's like going to the theater and watching a good play. But the premise is what makes this such an amazing, amazing film. We're going to go ahead and finish watching the trailer before we dive into the rest of the actual, what is this show and why. Not show, but what is this film and why I'm talking about here on my channel, because I love reviewing things that for me are super interesting. Like, we do the favorite sci-fi TV shows, we do the film reviews and everything else, and this is one of those that I absolutely think you need to watch. But let's finish watching the trailer here.
We were just talking about a caveman who survives until the present time.
And he hasn't aged a day in 10 years. Every woman on the faculty would give anything to have that secret.
Jeez! Oh!
I don't have eyes in the back of my head. I can't hear a flea walking. I am not in any way Superman.
There
Not Superman.
have always been legends of such a thing, a creature, not quite human, taking not the blood, but the life force itself.
It's a brilliant concept. So if you haven't watched this film ever, here's the basic gist. And as we're going through the trailer here, and we'll talk more about it. But the idea is that what if there was a person, a man, who has lived for thousands and thousands and thousands of years and is behind all of the myths and legends we have about supernatural beings, whether it's Jesus or Dracula or the Buddha. Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
God has spoken through man to make his word clearer.
You got 4 men of science completely baffled, my friend. Who do you think I am?
You are absolutely certifiable.
You stand alive and tall in a graveyard that you helped to fill? Well, then perhaps it is time to die.
The Man from Earth. Now, you're not going to find any like high quality, anything from this film because it is a very indie film. So there is a version, I think, on YouTube that you can watch, but it's not the best quality. So if you really want to dive into this, you need to go out there and find it wherever you can stream it or download it or anything else. And oh my God, that's not in dark mode. Sorry about that, everybody. So what is The Man from Earth, and why do I think you need to go watch this film? It's brilliant. It is a brilliant film. It's a 2007 American science fiction drama film directed by Richard Shankman, written by Jerome Bixby, who conceived the screenplay in the early 1960s and completed it on his deathbed in 1998. Bixby did a lot of Star Trek and Twilight Zone episodes. Stars David Lee Smith as John Oldman, a departing university professor who claims to be a caveman who has secretly survived for more than 14,000 years. The entire film is set in and around his house during a farewell party as he leaves the university, and it's composed almost entirely of dialogue. The plot advances through intellectual arguments between Oldman and his fellow faculty members, all of whom are people of science. It talks here about it mirrors similar concepts of longevity, which he had introduced in Requiem for Methuselah, which was a Star Trek episode that aired in 1969, and initially gained recognition through peer-to-peer torrents and stuff, and then was adapted into a stage play. I do not recommend that you watch the follow-up to this. The follow-up is an absolute steaming pile of garbage. It really is. Like, it's just not worth your time. I went into it hoping to see something similar to this film because the film was amazing, and it was garbage. This, however, this film is a brilliant piece of, it's science fiction, but it's honestly, it's one of the better independent films I've ever seen that is just pure dialogue in terms of just having a super interesting concept about a guy who has been alive for, tens of thousands of years. And it really pushes the boundaries of all of the people who are at the table having discussions with him. The most important, of course, is the person who is one of the women who's a religious person, and she struggles, really struggles with the idea that he is behind the Jesus myth. Hey everyone, Ren Fail here with the commercial part of the video where I say, hey, if you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. And thanks to all of our supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, our highest members, our guild champions, Crazy Relative, Remy D here on YouTube. And don't forget, if you want to support, it's really easy. You can do the memberships below, the Adventurers Guild, 3 different tiers. There's also the super thanks on any uploaded video or YouTube short that you find. There's also, of course, the super chats and stickers that you could do on any live stream or premiere, and the Patreon page if you want to dive into the fantasy world that I have with my brother and my wife, which is a tabletop game, a point-and-click adventure game, and a fantasy book series. All are great ways to keep this channel going and me going full-time. Thanks again for those of you who support. Let's get back to the video that you're watching now. Because he apparently can't die, and so yeah, he went through this traumatic event, and then 3 days later came back, and she really struggles with that. So I think that if you like something that's going to be really thought-provoking, go watch this film. We're going to kind of go through the plot here, because I think it's worth reading through and kind of explaining some of the things that I remember from the film, sort of giving my point of view. But essentially, it starts off with the professor, John Oldman. He's packing his belongings onto a pickup truck, getting ready to move to a new home, and his colleagues show up to give him an impromptu farewell party. You've got Harry, who's a biologist, Edith, who's an art history professor and a devout Christian, Dan, who's an anthropologist, and Sandy, who is a historian, and Art, who's an archaeologist, along with his student, Linda. Now, the premise for this is that because all of the people at the table are scientists in some way, shape, or form, they are going to be able to grill him on all the different angles of his story. So you have an archaeologist, you have an anthropologist, you have a biologist, you have a history professor. So all of these elements combine together, which is why the dialogue is so good, because all of the things that he talks about, the right questions are being asked. How is this possible from a biological standpoint? Well, what about the historical significance? What about the religious significance? So on and so forth. It's super interesting. His colleagues want to know why he's leaving. It's an impromptu. He just decided to leave his post at the university, and they're like, what is going on? Why are you leaving? And he says he picks up a reference to Magdalenian cultures by Dan and slowly and somewhat reluctantly reveals that he was born in the Paleolithic period, stating that he's lived for more than 14,000 years and that he relocates every 10 years or so to keep people from realizing that he does not age. But he begins his tale under the guise of a possible science fiction story, eventually stops speaking in hypotheticals and begins answering questions from a first-person perspective. They refuse to believe his colleagues his story, but accept it as a working hypothesis in order to glean his true intentions. He relates that he was a Sumerian for 2,000 years, then a Babylonian, then he went east to become a disciple of the Buddha. He claims to have had a chance to sail with Columbus, believing that at the time the Earth was still flat, and also talks about having befriended Van Gogh. He also owns an original painting, which supposedly was a gift from him. Of course, over the course of the conversation, each guest questions his story based on their own unique scientific specialty. Harry, for example, struggles with how biology could allow for the possibility of a human being living for so long, while Art, the most skeptical of the group, questions the prehistory components. He exclaims that John's answers, although correct, could have come from any textbook. John says that, like any human, his memory is imperfect, and he only sees events from his own narrow, hence not omniscient perspective. Dr. Gruber, a psychiatry professor, who arrives later that evening, questions if John feels guilt for outliving everyone he has ever known and loved. Smeagol, you need to get down, buddy. Then threatens John with a gun later on, before temporarily leaving. It's just all this stuff going on. The question then veers to religion. John mentioning that he doesn't follow any, even though he doesn't necessarily believe in an omnipotent God. He does not discount the possibility of such beings' existence. He then talks about how he picked up Buddha's teaching and then took that teaching into the Eastern Roman Empire, into the Western world, where he became the inspiration for the Jesus story. And this is where things really go off the rails. Smeagol, come on, buddy, get down. You're being an obnoxious kitty cat. Come on, get into the chair. Thank you very much. Because while most of the questions up to this point have been scientific and sort of philosophical in nature, this is when we get into things that really some people really struggle with. It says here, emotions in the room run high when he reveals that he became the inspiration for the Jesus story, where Edith, who represents the true believer of the group, begins to cry. And then Will, who's returned because he didn't know what to do after this revelation, demands that John end his tale and give the group a sense of closure by admitting that it was all a hoax. Threatens to have John committed for psychiatric evaluation, should he refuse to do so. John Nez, he goes, fine, everybody. It was just a prank. And everybody is like having various reactions. Edith's relieved. Harry indicates an open mind. Art never wants to see John again. Will still believes he needs professional help. Sandy and Linda believe him. Dan is implied to believe him, and everyone else but Will and Sandy have. And after everyone else but Will and Sandy have left, Will overhears John and Sandy's conversations, which suggests the story could be true. John mentions some of the pseudonyms he's used over the years, and Will realizes that one of them was his father's name. He has a heart attack, dies in John's arms. After the body is taken away, Sandy realizes that if this story is true, this is the first time John has ever seen one of his grown children die. John then wordlessly gets in his truck and starts to drive to an unknown destination, but then he reconsiders and waits for Sandy, who walks over and gets in, and they both depart. I'm literally just reading the wiki at this point because it's a very good breakdown of the story. I think for me, the elements of this film that I like the most are the potential whys of this, especially when looking at the mythology behind religion. Because so many of the stories that we have about religion, not just the Jesus myth, but all of these various, religious mythologies, all tie back to similar stories. And if you look at the similarities between Buddhism and Christianity, as an example, looking at the Buddha, the Jesus, these, Allah is another one, Muhammad, sorry. All of these prophetic figures have something very similar. And if they all came from the same root source, that's a very interesting concept. And that's something that this film is diving into. The idea that not only could he be the source of the religious mythologies, but also for things like vampires, because there's this mythology of the everlasting creature who can live forever, and many superstitious belief systems believe that that individual can only survive because he is draining other people of their life essence or their blood or whatever the case may be. And this ties into that mythology as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this film, which is one of the reasons that I think it's such an amazing drama movie to watch. Again, there's no special effects. It's just dialogue. That's all it is. But it's so worth your time. So if you haven't watched it yet, it's called The Man from Earth. I have no idea where you can find it right now. It might be on Amazon or Hulu. I don't know where it might be streaming. Do not watch the sequel. It's horrible. The sequel is called The Man from Earth Holocene, with a couple of actors reprising their roles. And it was really, really, really bad. Really, really bad. There was two. Then it says there was two previous attempts at producing sequels. A Kickstarter campaign did not get the minimum support. There was another crowdfunded attempt which did succeed, which led to The Man from Earth Holocene. It was really, really bad. Don't watch it. But this one you should watch. Just called from The Man from Earth. It's 2007. Check it out. Love to hear your thoughts if you have seen it. Till next time, stay safe. Happy viewing, everybody.